to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. This is the place where you get both a coach's and sports dietitian perspective on topics important to endurance sports, including nutrition, training, and how these impact and fit into your daily life both on and off the race course. Your host, Coach Justin, certified run and triathlon coach and owner of Tabula Rasa Racing, along with Coach Katie, a registered dietitian with a specialty in sports nutrition and owner of Fuel to Run. Here at the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast is where your journey begins. Welcome. This is episode 11 to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I'm your host, Coach Justin. I'm here with Coach Katie. Today we are going to be discussing training in the heat. So heat training. Most of us, at least on the East Coast, are out here cooking ourselves. So walking outside is training peaks loggable. So as we kind of adjust to the rising temps and humidity levels, this is a pertinent topic, and I think it is a very timely one at that. And so today we're going to discuss the physiological perspective on what happens during heat training. What really is heat training, and what are you trying to accomplish with this style of training at this time of year? Things to consider, factors to consider when assessing if it's too hot to train outside. And really when you start to break into that risky zone, when you start to get towards more heat stroke and heat exhaustion, that is a really performance inhibitor and really kind of dangerous health-wise. So trying to assess when you've kind of entered into that realm. We're going to talk about some of the metrics that I like to use as a coach and as an athlete on things that I look at in terms of humidity, dew points, and temperatures to really kind of evaluate my performance and to set expectations either pre-workout or to explain performance post-workout. We'll go into ways to get the most out of your heat training. So we want to maximize the benefit and minimize the cost associated with that kind of exposure. And so we'll give you some ideas on things to look into, ways to adjust your training, ways to adjust expectations as you go out. If you're forced to train outside, we'll also talk about options if you have the ability to not necessarily train outside all the time in order to really pick where you do your quality sessions, whether that be indoors and outdoors, to get the best bang for your buck. So that is a good overview on what we're going to be talking about today in episode 11 of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I'm going to introduce here Coach Katie. Katie, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, yeah. We're talking a little bit off mic, but I haven't really been doing as much heat training because I had a little minor periodontal surgery, so they made me take 5 days off of, a week off of running, and I'm taking 6 days because it said about, I always push the limit a little bit, but so I haven't really been able to run, which is almost like torture for me personally. So I'm going out, I did a very easy jog this morning, but I just haven't really had a chance to do a whole lot of heat training yet, so this is relevant for me. Little reminder of what I'm coming up against.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, we're glad that you're on the mend, and hopefully that you'll start to lace up the run shoes once again fairly soon. I thought I saw in Training Peaks that you might have tapped into a run today, right?
Yeah, very easy. I was like, they're like,
yeah,
walk and hike, and I'm like, this is day 6, I think. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go really easy. It was very some walking, running, really light. So just kind of testing it out to see if it hurt my mouth at all, or it didn't really do much. So I'm like, okay, tomorrow I'm gonna do a little mini workout, and then I have a 5K on Friday. So hopefully, awesome. They did tell me I could do that. So I'm not doing that against they were aware of it. So hopefully, I'm getting my stitches out, which is all down here. Tomorrow, so that'll be fun, I'm sure.
All right, we're glad that you're back on the mend.
Yeah. How is the training going for you? East Coast,
it is freaking hot, is what it is. It is a sweaty mess. Yeah, I do a lot of my outdoor work just on the bike, just because it's just too freaking hot to run. So I'll talk a little bit about in our podcast. If you're a triathlete, you have the benefit of having multiple sports that you can kind of focus on. So I do some of my heat acclimation training on the bike, where it's the safest for me, and that's just the way it's been lately. I'm kind of giving the Achilles a chance to repair itself from the last race. I guess in one of the last episodes that we did, where we talked about our race recaps, my Achilles were a little cooked and they were a little on the hot side. So last week I did 2 by 30 minute treadmill runs, and I could feel the Achilles start to kind of fire up around 20 minutes. And so I said, well, I guess I'm not ready to run 30 minutes. So what I did for this week is I adjusted it and I'm doing 3 by 20 minute runs instead of 2 by 30 minute runs. I still get a total of 60 minutes of running in the week, but I push it just to the point where I think that Achilles starts to heat up, and then I shut it down. And I'll start to build from there until right around August is when I'll start half marathon training. So a lot of heavy lifting in the gym. We started a new weight routine, so another 12-week block in the weight room, so a different kind of focus there, building strength rather than working on some kind of endurance and maintenance now that tri season is over for me. But that's where we are. So excited.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into the first thing, and we'll talk about. Let me scroll back up here from my notes. All right, so the physiological perspective of when we train in the heat. So, Katie, give us kind of like a brief understanding on what the body is going through physiologically when it is exposed to high temperatures, and that can be either high temperatures, high humidity, high dew point, any kind of adverse temperature where it raises the body's core temp.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll talk a little bit more about those different factors too, because as you know, like it could be 80 outside or in the 70s, and if the humidity is high enough, it can kind of have the same effect. So it's
Yeah.
all those factors come into play. But essentially, when we start exercising, we'll start sweating sooner, and so that is also sometimes a sign that when you kind of get that sweat happening earlier, sometimes that can be a sign you're getting a little more adapted to it. But that's one of the first things you'll notice. And then inside your body, there is a increase in the blood plasma volume. So you'll start to have sort of this increased volume occurring. And that is essentially like that happens kind of early on. If you're not hydrating well enough as you're running or as you're cycling or whatever you're doing in the outdoors, then that actually will decrease throughout. So sometimes that can impact other things as you're exercising more, and if you're not hydrating correctly. And we'll talk a little bit about the risks of and why hydration is so important later on as well. Your heart rate kind of starts to go up a little bit more. So if you notice while you're exercising, maybe your heart rate is 5 to 10 points higher for that same exertion or that same pace. That's very common and something you want to keep an eye out on as well, because that can be problematic potentially, if you're trying to do a lot of hard workout. And then the plasma increase is actually something, and we'll talk about this when we talk about like heat as a way to adapt. So heat as a way to maybe build more red blood cells we'll talk about that later on, but that is one thing if you do the heat training on a regular basis. Now, this isn't something that happens when you go out for one hot run. You're not going to build plasma and therefore build more red blood cells, because when your body has more, or your blood has more volume in it, then the body senses, oh, there's like a dilution of red blood cells, and then it wants to kind of build up more. But you have to have that happening more often for that adaptation to occur. And I would say at least a couple times a week of doing some sort of heat training, and over a period of time, maybe a month or two, you'll get that adaptation. So there's sort of this acute adaptation that you have when you're in the middle of it, and then potentially some long-term adaptations that occur I think over time also it's just that perception too, right? Just sort of just like feeling like, oh, the heat isn't so bad. Like you're just adapting to it. Your body's sort of
Right.
adjusting itself, like its sweat rate, other things are adjusting to kind of be able to tolerate that heat a little bit better. So you may not feel like, I feel like this is what happens to me. Like the first few days I'm going out and it's hot out, I'm like, this is awful. Like I can't even barely run. It's like everything just sucks about it. And then by the end of the summer, I feel like I'm adapted to it. So oh, this isn't so bad, right? It's like I'm kind of used to this. And so that's one thing that kind of happens too, is just our perception of the situation maybe changes a little bit, maybe or because of the adaptations we are having. Did you anything you wanted to add? Anything I didn't kind of mention with that?
One thing that I would like to bring about is, physiologically, kind of what's going on is that when during those first kind of like 30 minutes seems to be kind of the window. What's happening is that the blood is rushing to the skin in order to produce sweat, which is what the body wants to do, and it produces the sweat to cool the body. And so there's this rush of blood to other parts of your body, to produce the droplets. So one thing that I would like for you to mention briefly about is, because we have this I don't want to say diversion, but this redirection of blood. What does that do to our body's ability to consume nutrition and absorb the nutrients? Not just water, but we're talking about electrolytes. So you've got potassium, sodium, magnesium. Those are the three main components of an electrolyte. And then you have your carbohydrates and your calories. So with the redirection of blood, we know that digestion requires blood flow. And so talk about it from your perspective on what's the body trying to do and what is it going through when we're trying to intake nutrition while heat training.
Yeah, actually, like I think that's a good point. I think that's another reason why there's a difference between like fluids with electrolytes and just regular water versus trying to take in food. So in general, when we're taking in fluid, especially if it has electrolytes, because that kind of facilitates the absorption, our body has a way to absorb that, and it's just kind of it makes it easy to kind of absorb that fluid, but the electrolytes kind of help facilitate that. So I do always recommend, especially in heat training, that you are taking in not just like plain old water, but you're taking in some electrolytes. The problem is when we're actually talking about like carbohydrate intake and some sort of actual fueling during training, because there is a more active way that our body brings those carbs in. And so when we have that like diversion, which happens anyways, I mean, this is happening even in the cold weather, you have a little bit of that blood flow being diverted, but it's more so in the heat. There's just more chance potentially that you can have some of those GI side effects that, can often occur. And I think most people have sort of witnessed that in the heat. Maybe they're just not really digesting things as well, or they're taking things in and they're feeling nauseated, or they're like, oh, it's just kind of sloshing around and that's not really being absorbed. And so it's just something you have to kind of consider, that maybe your nutrition plan for the rest of the year isn't always going to work as well as it may or it works better the rest of the year, and then it's not going to work as well in that heat training scenario. So you may have to make adjustments. Some people may have to rely more on like liquid fuel, for instance, that something that maybe does have the carb and some electrolytes and is more, easy to digest versus taking in food or solids. So something I notice in the heat is I like to take, like, sometimes when I'm doing like a long run, like fig bars or dates or more solid food, but in the heat I just can absolutely not tolerate that. So I'm just sort of relying on easier to digest things, and maybe I'm spacing it out a little more so it's not trying to put so much in at once. I mean, there's just some changes you may have to actually make to your body, to your fueling plan to have your body be able to like absorb those nutrients. So that's a really good point. I think something worth considering, and I think something most people have experienced, but not an excuse not to eat anything. Just an excuse you might have to try different things in the heat. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to bring it up because sometimes, as we're signing up for races, uh, and we start to test out different nutrition strategies. If you're signing up for a deep in the summer, like right in the middle of the year, where you can expect it to be hot and humid. So, they just did Ironman, I think it was Rockford, which was blazing hot. Then you have Ironman Chattanooga, which tends to be another hot one, which I think is in September, I believe. And then you have the Ironman Chattanooga 70.3, which is earlier in the year, but it's May, so it was still really, really hot. Then you have races that are almost like Ironman Florida, which is I think like October or November, later into the year. You have Ironman North Carolina, which has
Something in
78.3.
Mexico, Cozumel or something.
Yeah, Cozumel, but it's going to be a hot one because it's in Cozumel, Mexico. Even though it's like right around Thanksgiving, it's still it's always a hot and humid race.
Yeah, that one
So
I
it's
had a client who actually suffered
yeah,
from, we'll talk about this later, but he suffered from severe hyponatremia, low sodium levels, like almost he had to be admitted to the hospital. It was so bad and it was really scary. He came to me after after he
yeah.
suffered that, he came to me to figure out what am I doing? I don't want to have that happen again, but it was Cozumel. So I was like, that must be a hot one. I'm guessing because it's Mexico, but yeah.
Yeah, it's just something to consider. Like if you're signing up for these types of races, which are going to be historically hot and humid, it might be one where you just say, "Look, I need to really focus on my nutrition strategy being primarily liquid based." And maybe you throw in just a little bit of solids just to kind of cleanse the palate a little bit from all this kind of the sugar, like the drinks that you're drinking all the time, and maybe absorb some of the fluids, rather than kind of using a more evenly distributed nutrition plan where you're kind of doing some fluids and you're doing some solids, and to try and balance out so you don't get that sloshy feeling all the time. It's just something to consider because it's something you're going to be working on this nutrition plan for a while to find out timing and what works, what doesn't work, how often should you be eating. Are foods going to sit very well on you and which ones aren't? So there's a lot of trial and error that's going to be taking place. It's not like you're going to get it solved out for your first race. I've been doing this for over 10 years and I still haven't quite figured out a nutrition strategy that works all the time because it's so unique to races. And so I think that this new aspect that we're bringing in this the heat really has a driving factor in your body's ability to absorb. And if you have a hard time absorbing, you're going to not get the performance that you're really looking for. And I don't want to see like all this training, be put in just to kind of, have this roadblock in front of you when it comes to race day. You're just like, I did all the work. I don't know what happened. And so
Mhm.
it's just something I would, suggest
Derail
to
your
keep in the front of the mind.
yeah, if you're like if your nutrition strategy doesn't go well or you're having issues getting enough calories or carbs in, it can be something potentially. I mean, either way, or you're trying to take in the nutrition and then you have a gut issue, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden you're using the porta potties all the time. Like that, those scenarios can both sort of derail a race and it's challenging, so it does
Yeah.
take some practice. And I think this is where just like we recommend so much like practicing what you're doing in training for the race. Like this is also in the heat is a great example if you're going to have a hot race or be doing a race when it's warm. Practicing that so that you kind of know, okay, well, when I take this stuff that usually works for me, it doesn't really work in this scenario. I'm gonna have to rely a little bit more on these other options that maybe are easier to digest. And yeah, unfortunately, sometimes you sort of have to force nutrition down a little bit, and flavor fatigue is a true thing. But if you're tolerating gels or liquid nutrition a little bit better, but you tend to like the solid stuff better, you might just have to kind of be like, hey, you know what, I'm just gonna have to do it do this so I can have a good race because I know if I introduce something more solid it doesn't go well. I don't know, so you do have to kind of practice that, especially kind of try like if you kind of know what the temperatures are going to be like for the race, which is sometimes hard to know exactly. But traditionally, you kind of look, okay, it's usually pretty warm. You kind of have to practice what you're going to do in similar situations, which can be hard sometimes for someone. Like if I were to run a race in the East Coast in the humidity and heat, that would be a hard one for me to figure out where I'm at because it's so dry. But it's something you want to kind of consider is that practice piece. So, you still there?
What happened?
I don't know. I hear you, but I don't see you for some reason.
Hold
Weird.
on, hold on. What is my computer just absolutely? Can you hear me at least?
I hear you, but you so we can keep going. I need to plug mine in.
Uh, yeah. Hold on. I mean, everything is plugged in, so let's kind of see what's going on here. I have Cameo up here. Right. Okay. Let's see. While I get this issue resolved, our next thing that we wanted to talk about was some of the factors to consider when assessing if it's too hot to run outside. So let's operate under the assumption that you don't have the ability to do indoor workouts, and so all your training is going to be outdoors. So what are some things that you should consider when evaluating if it's too hot to be outside and maybe timing when you should do your workout?
Yeah, I mean, and we can both kind of touch on this, but I think there's like a couple things. Like, I think sometimes people want, okay, like I want like a parameter here. I want you to give me like a number. What is it? Like, if it's this hot, I shouldn't go outside. And I don't know if we can really exactly say that because it's very different for each person and how much you have already heat trained and kind of how much you can tolerate. I do want to say like heat exhaustion typically occurs when you're exposed to heat above 101 to 104 degrees. So obviously, if you're going to be going out in like 105-degree temps, that's pretty hot. Like that might involve like some real things you bring with you to keep yourself cool and things like that. But just that's something that I kind of looked up is like when does heat exhaustion typically occur. And it's also recommended by the Roadrunners Club of America not to go but when the temps outside are above 98.6 degrees and the humidity is greater than 70 to 80%. So we'll talk a little bit about the dew point too, but that was their recommendation. But of course, there are these different factors we want to talk to. We do think maybe dew point might be the better way to assess as well. So we'll talk about that. But let's dive into that, Justin. So like the first one is that we talked about already. The temperature and humidity is going to be a big piece. The higher the temps, you could be living in Arizona and it might be like 100 degrees, but it's so dry that you can probably sort of tolerate that okay as long as you have fluid. Whereas if it's 100 degrees in Virginia, but it's 80 some percent humidity, that might be a riskier situation. So we want to, you always want to kind of look at both of those factors, both the heat or the temperature and the humidity. But what are some other factors? We can kind of go through those. Do you want to talk about the next few or what do you think? No, I can't hear you. I can I can see you now, but I can't hear you. I don't know why it's going on. All right. Well, while he's figuring that out, I'll mention it's okay. I'll talk a little bit so he's kind of looking into that, but acclimatization is not a word apparently I can say that well. But runners who are acclimated to the warmer climates can maybe who are gradually increasing their exposure to heat can tolerate those temperatures a little bit better. So, I think the best way to sort of start with heat training is to, yeah, I think I can hear you now, is to
Okay, good.
like maybe with shorter runs outside and then kind of gradually, or, start with not doing all of your runs maybe out in the heat, but trying to do some in the heat and then some, in a cooler environment, but try to sort of gradually acclimate yourself. And then so for the individual factors, do you want to chat about that? About the age, things like that?
Yeah. So I've had to disconnect my other monitor, so now I'm trying to share this 17-inch screen monitor, and I'm 48 years old, and my eyesight sucks. So So let's see.
I could
Um,
I could hit on that if you want because there's like little like
so we
there's
have the individual factors, running intensity and duration. So one of the things that I'll just say this. So one of the things that I do when it comes to dealing with the heat is I don't particularly like doing quality sessions outdoors when the conditions are such that it's going to really either dig me a hole for the next day or really kind of like just take too much out of me. So one of the things that I like to do is just take those quality sessions indoors. Do those inside if you have that option. But if you don't have the option, then here's the rub. You can either, if you live on the East Coast, you know intimately what humidity is. So you can either run early morning where temperatures are lower, but dew points are going to be higher, humidity is going to be higher. Or you can run in the evening where you may have lower dew point and lower humidity, but you're going to have higher temps. So any way you look at it, if people just say, well, just train in the morning when you have lower temps, that doesn't, it's not going to change what the body feels like when it's trying to execute a workout. All it knows is that it's going to be under stress. It doesn't care that, it might be a few degrees lower than it will be at like 2 p.m., but you're going to have 90% humidity with dew points upwards of like 70 to 74 degrees, which is going to greatly affect your performance. So, as we've said before, stress is stress. And it doesn't really matter whether you're going to be training in the morning or you're going to be training in the evening. So, one of the things that we typically will encourage athletes to do is to adjust expectations. It may not be where you're trying to now focus on a particular kind of pace, but you're going to be fixating on effort. Running at a zone 2 effort in with a 74 degree dew point and maybe 80 degree temperatures is going to feel hard. So the pace that you think that you should be able to hit or you have been able to hit at a zone 2 effort, you may not be able to hit that pace anymore. So stop chasing the pace and chase the effort. Sun exposure, finding shaded routes, something that has a little bit better tree coverage. So if you can maybe pick up, do some of your speed work, in the earlier part of the year where temperatures and conditions are conducive to seeing fitness gains. And then when you start to break into the summertime, then is a great time to put the road shoes in the corner and put on your trail shoes and maybe hit some of the trails. It's going to bring about development of all kinds of other muscles that do not get engaged and aren't activated the way that they are when you're running on the road. It's going to make you a more well-rounded runner. Plus, you're going to open up a whole bunch of different routes that you can do where you're going to have shaded areas where it may be a little bit easier. Right off the bat, going from the road to the trail, your pace is going to drop significantly. So it actually may be helpful to taper your efforts by making that transition to the trails, because you're going to be forced to run at a slower pace, even though the effort may be a little bit still elevated. It's still harder, I think. Personally, I think it's harder to run on trails, but I can't hit the same kind of pace.
Depends on where you're going. Are you running trails in the Rocky Mountains where you're gonna have some elevation gain? You know what I mean? Like,
I don't get that. I don't get the same feedback from the trail. So, if you're talking like single track, your foot doesn't hit cleanly. it could, kind of rock to one side, to the left, to the right. So you don't get that nice clean foot contact where you can kind of roll through the foot strike. Also, you're doing on rocks, and like fire roads and things like that, you don't get that same kind of like toe off that you would from running on the road. So, it's a great time to work on form, making sure that, you're working on foot clearance, making sure that you're picking up your feet. You don't have that same, I don't believe that you have that same kind of focus when you're running on the road. We don't really care much about foot clearance or not, but when it comes to the trails, I think that encourages it, and it
Yeah,
will encourage that more knee drive, a
you
more
have to kind
efficient
of
run gait.
be more aware, like you're kind of, where on the roads, I think you can kind of like zone out. You're just going, you're plodding along. There aren't any obstacles, things that you can kind of like, trip on, or, there's no loose, like as much loose gravel that you could probably slide on. So I think on the trail, you're just, yeah, you almost have to be a little more aware and present, about where you're stepping and how you're stepping and movement patterns and things like that. And I do love the trails because it does force me, at least, like you're saying, to slow down just naturally. And so I don't care about pace. Like, and I can, whereas when I'm on the roads, I'm always, even in the summer when I know it's hot, I'm always so angry. Like, like I'm not, this is so hard. Why is this so much harder? And I know, like, logically, it's just my body's working harder, and that's okay. That's part of it. But it's hard for me to just see that and see what my pace is and see what my effort is. It makes me frustrated. So like taking it to the trails, if you can, or if when I can, it's nice because it's like I'm not looking at pace because I know I'm going uphill or downhill, or the train is weird and I have to slow down for that reason, and it's like very freeing, but you're still getting in a really good workout. And if you can do it in somewhere shady, then you're kind of getting a cooler, or if you can go a little bit higher elevation, it's just a little bit cooler. So yeah, I think for all those reasons, it's a great idea, a great time to, in the summer, to hit the trails. I agree. Yeah, to kind of get just a different stimulus too, like you're saying.
I think it also when it comes to having a really good understanding on how acclimated you are to the heat. Maybe if you're not so acclimation is just going to be, I like to equate acclimation to how fast I start to sweat. So when summer first starts rolling around, it takes a while for my body to start to sweat. But as I become more and more used to the heat and more exposed, my sweat rate starts to happen more. So I start sweating sooner, which is how I know that my body is starting to get used to the heat and used to the exposure. So if you're not acclimated, then maybe picking a few easy sessions to do of your weekly volume, use those as your outdoor workouts, or maybe the ones that you do, in the heat, really, maybe find like a late morning, where the dew point starts to drop a little bit and the humidity starts to burn off, but the temperature starts starting to rise. If you split up your training volume to long run, moderate run, and easy run, or short runs, do some of those short runs and save the other runs for either different times of the day or take them indoors until you spend maybe 4 weeks or so, and you start to notice that your body starts to sweat a little bit more. Then you can start moving more of your workouts outside. Maybe the longer runs can start taking place as your body starts to get used to it. So the point that I'm trying to make is that it's a slow process. It's not something that just kind of like happens. It's not something where it's just like, okay, I'm going out and this week we're going to have, high temps. So by the end of this week, I'm going to be acclimated to the heat. I'm sorry to tell you, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
It takes
it takes me.
it takes several weeks to become acclimated and
It's
for
like
your body to
September, and
adjust
I'm
to it.
like, oh, I feel like I'm finally getting used to this, and then the temperature starts to get better, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, now that I'm finally used
Yeah.
to the heat, I'm like, you know what I mean? It's like for me, anyways. It seems like it takes a couple months, and then and then
Yes.
I'm finally like, okay, I can handle this, and it starts to cool down a little. So it's like a weird. I mean, maybe at that point I should actually sort of roll with it and start to do some sort of additional heat training to keep that benefit. But yeah, it doesn't just happen in a week, and I think that's good to hear. I think that's because I think sometimes, like I said, I get frustrated when I'm out there trying to do workouts or runs, and it's slower and it's just hard to know that it takes time, and you can't expect for that process to happen in a week. And so I think that kind of gives it helps people who are maybe listening to this realize like, oh, like that's normal. Like I'm not expected to have these same performances or do the same workout at the same pace, because it's hot out, and not that that should be an excuse to like maybe not do the workout or not, but you just have to adjust your expectations. I mean, in some cases, you probably shouldn't do the workout if it's that hot out, but we'll talk a little bit about the dangers and some of the issues with being, with heat, and some of the concerns with heat stroke and things like that. But yeah, I think it's really good to mention it does take quite a while to kind of adjust, and
Yeah.
it doesn't happen. I think too, I just want to mention a few other factors just to
Yeah.
consider. So age, unfortunately, like as we get older, so it's like when we're really young, like little kids don't tolerate the heat that well. And then obviously like everything, like when you're in your 20s and 30s, maybe into your 40s, you can tolerate it pretty well. But then the older we get, the less tolerant we become. So age is a factor. That's why we always, if you have little kids, you don't want to have them out in the heat too long either. Health conditions, so like heart problems, obviously, things like diabetes. There's other health, any kind of health condition you have, you just maybe want to be aware that you might have a harder time in the heat. Some medications, so just checking that, and then yeah, just looking at those little factors too individually for yourself, thinking, okay, I've got this particular condition, maybe it's going to put me at a little more risk, so I need to be aware of that. Um, and then I think we kind of covered like most of those. I mean, obviously we covered a little bit the intensity and duration, so I think we'll cover that a little bit more on some things that you can do to not tolerate, because we didn't like that word because it's never very
Right.
tolerable, but how to make more of or how to kind of adjust your expectations, make more of the heat. But first, let's just dive a little bit into some of the potential risks, because I think we
Yes.
can't kind of talk about heat training without mentioning there are, some very serious risks to going out in the heat. And I'm just going to mention this because it was something that I watched and it was interesting. And unfortunately, so David Roach is the ultra runner who he was going for Western States, and unfortunately, he didn't do as well as he wanted, which was kind of sad because I've been watching his videos, his YouTube videos. But he did this whole heat training thing where he had a heat suit on, and he went into this 20-mile run in this like heat suit. And I watched that and I was like, oh, and he did say like disclaimer, don't do this. And he had a core
Yeah.
temperature monitor. But I think people see that and they're like, and unfortunately there are people that are like, oh, I need to be doing this. Like this is the thing I need to do is heat training. And I think it's really important to be aware of the very real consequences if you do get heat stroke or your core temperature goes too high. So I don't know, like, the symptoms there. I mean, I can mention those really quickly, then we can kind of dive into some of the risks there. But it can happen very gradually sometimes. So I think people think, oh, I'm going to know. I'm going to like know exactly when I'm experiencing heat stroke, and it may not be something, it can be very quick, but it can also be fairly gradual. So just keeping that in mind, to always be sort of checking yourself for symptoms. And some of the symptoms are like dizziness or nausea. So if you're kind of experiencing some sort of dizziness, like you might fall, or you're not, maybe you're tripping a little bit more while you're running, or there's something kind of weird happening, like that, you're just not as aware of the surroundings, or things are kind of happening that are odd, like that might be a sign. Nausea, like you're like, oh, I'm gonna throw up. And excessive sweating, I think both excessive sweating and then not sweat. Like if you stop sweating, like you've
Yeah.
been sweating and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm not really sweating, probably a bad sign there. And then if you start sweating like excessively, like it's all of a sudden you're like completely drenched. The hard part about that is it's hard to know sometimes when you're excessively sweating. Like I remember being in Houston, Texas for my dietetic internship, and it was 100 degrees and like hot. It was just hot and humid. that summer, and I was running, and I was completely drenched in my own sweat. Like I had just taken a shower because it was that bad. Sometimes it's hard to know, like, because you're already sweaty, but those are some of the symptoms. Um, and if you happen to be taking your core temperature, which really involves sticking a thermometer up your butt, so I don't know who's going to do that. And a lot of, and you can talk about I don't know if you know much about the technology that they have, the core temp monitors. I don't think they're that accurate all the time, but 104 degrees or higher is where we actually run into heat stroke. So you don't want to get your body to that point. I guess you could try using a regular ear thermometer. I just don't know how well, because you're trying to measure a core. So that probably maybe isn't as accurate as something more closer to your core. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Justin, anything you
I
want to
mean,
add? Or
I can say that in my past experiences, I have not gotten to the point where I feel like I've had heat stroke. I have crossed the finish line and been taken right to the med tent on several occasions. But it was kind of like it was a fluid thing where they just kind of hooked me up to an IV, and I was good and set me on my way. It could have been just kind of like a stomach issue. I didn't take in enough fluids, or whatever. It was on me, and that was my only experience. But I can say that I've never experienced the nausea or the dizziness. I know sometimes if I feel like I'm in the heat, things feel like my brain starts to feel like things are moving in slow motion. That's when I start to think, okay, this isn't normal, and then I adjust accordingly. But I can't say that I've felt like dizzy, like things are swirling, or I've felt nauseous. I've had situations where I couldn't take in nutrition, and my stomach kind of shut down. But I don't know if that was heat or if that was I was racing at an intensity that I wasn't used to, and then I was trying to take in nutrition at the same time, and my body just said nope, it ain't happening, and so it just kind of shut down. But I don't think it was the conditions that I
Well,
was in.
sometimes those
But
symptoms too are interesting because the nausea could be, yeah, totally gut related, right? Like that. So I think sometimes that's a hard thing is you might be like, oh, I'm feeling nauseous, but maybe you're thinking, oh, I didn't take in the right nutrition or something. And so it might be hard to decipher that that could be heat stroke. And I don't think I've ever had heat stroke because if you do actually have heat stroke, it's very dangerous. And what I believe they have to do is try to get you in some ice, like cool you down rapidly. And so, like, if you ever are in that situation where you have a running and somebody's kind of maybe experiencing those symptoms, the better you can do to help cool them down quickly, I believe is, and I'm not a paramedic or anything, but I do think, you got to try to get their core body temperature back down. And so any, icing or, I think they even have these like these whole full body suits that you can buy or have at races that kind of help like bring your core temperature down. So yeah, it's very dangerous. I mean, if you think about what's happening and just kind of a visual, this may be a disturbing visual, but like if you're cooking an egg, when an egg yolk is clear and then it starts to whiten up and harden, that is like denaturing of the protein. And so you don't want your body temperature to get high enough that you're gonna, I'm sorry, that is my donkey. We don't hear.
this is going to be a unique episode. I'm having technical issues, and your donkey's trying to join in on the podcast.
No, I'm
So
sorry, his brain. So I have a miniature donkey that likes to, when he hears me sometimes and the window's open because it's warm. So I'm sorry. Well, hopefully people think that's cute instead of annoying. But anyways, like I was gonna, what was, I was like, now I'm like just totally distracted.
the
Yeah, the
deprotein.
denaturing of the protein. So you just don't like, if that's happening in your body, that's a problem, right? So we want to avoid that high temperature. And I think along with that, sometimes that dizziness or nausea can be not taking in the right. It could be heat stroke related. It could be not taking in the right amount of, or the carbs aren't being processed well. It can also be a sign of hyponatremia or low sodium levels. So it's just a fancy word of saying like low sodium hyponatremia. And that is actually a very, very real risk of heat. So I was telling Justin, I think before we got on, I had a client who did This is before I started working with him, so I didn't advise him for
So
this.
disclaimer,
Disclaimer,
disclaimer.
like, I didn't. He came to me after this because it was such a scary experience for him. But he did Ironman Cozumel, and I don't know when, how long ago this was, but he was taking in lots and lots and lots of water. Like knew, oh, I have to hydrate. I gotta hydrate, but not enough electrolytes, so not enough sodium. And he ended up having. So what happens when you do that? When you're just, oh, I'm gonna drink lots and lots of water because it's hot out, but you're not taking in the right amount of electrolytes, specifically sodium, but all of them, all electrolytes. Your body becomes very diluted with water,
Yeah.
and the cells become diluted with lots of water and not enough sodium. And sodium's like critical for like heart contractions and all sorts of things. It's just like very critical, right? We need it. I mean, you could do that and you're literally your heart, it's dangerous. Your heart could not function well because now you don't have that electrical signal to be able to like have your heart function. It's dangerous. And he ended up going to the hospital. They had pulled him off. He didn't finish it, I don't think. Actually, I'm not sure if he finished it, but they had to rush him to the hospital there. And he almost died literally because of this hyponatremia. So another thing, just water, yes, but you have to be taking in electrolytes when you're training in the heat and in races. Don't forget that. And I've actually suffered from mild levels of this. I know when I was mentioned being in Houston, but I remember running there and I don't think I might have just had water, and it wasn't even a very long run. It was like maybe an hour, and I got back and I'm like, oh, I feel nauseous. I'm so fatigued. Like I was like, oh, I got to go lie down. And it kind of hit me, I think, because I was at the time studying nutrition, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is symptoms of low sodium. And I went and I didn't have like a sodium concoction at the time, and I made myself like this lemonade and I put salt in it, drank that, and instantly felt like 100% better. It was like an
Yeah.
instant thing. And I'm like, yes, that's what it is, so we always want to make sure we are we always want to make sure we're like getting those electrolytes in as well. So I'm going to put that in there. I don't know if you have any experience with low levels of sodium, or anybody you worked with had any experiences like that, Justin, but yeah.
I've had a few races where I've had pretty severe cramps. And I know it was brought on by sodium levels. It was a really hot race. So the race is no longer around, but I did Ironman Syracuse 70.3 up in upstate New York 1 year. And I picked it because I was like, hey, it's upstate New York. It's early in the year. It's like Father's Day weekend or something like that. So I was like, this is going to be great. It should be nice and cool. And it was like record. It was like 90 degrees. It was freaking crazy conditions. And they're just like, oh, this isn't normal. And I was like, yeah, well, that's just my luck. This is the year I sign up for it. But the cramps got so bad that my toes were curling up in my shoes during the run, and it was brutal. And ever since then, there is a product that I've used, and it might be a good option to just throw it in right here since we're talking about hyponatremia. But I don't take it on a regular basis, but I have it as an emergency, and so it's something called base salt. It's just like a little vial, and it's kind of like pink, kind of like pink Himalayan salt. That's what it looks like, and it's just a little plastic tube. You dump the salt into it, and what you do, I just have it in all of my bags. So it's like I have it in my run vest, I have it in my bike bag, and all I do is I take it when needed, and when you feel it, you know it, and you just lick your thumb, put your thumb over it, and just turn it upside down, and then you'll have like a little circle of salt on your finger, and you just lick it. And so you take a couple hits of that, and then just put it back. It's gotten me through a couple races. I think I did. What was it? I want to say I used it during Ironman Louisville as well, but it was a really cold race, and so I was still experiencing kind of like some cramping during that race, which is kind of a unique situation. So I was really kind of like craving base salt, and they sometimes give them out on the courses. But it's something that I've learned in my experience that I just keep it on hand. And
Right.
I do have an athlete that tends to cramp up in the pool. He'll get foot cramps, and that usually happens like if he swims after he runs. you know, I don't know what the physiological thing is that's going on, but I've experienced it. Like if I go for a run and then I jump in the pool and do my swim workout, I'll get really bad foot cramps when you get the toe flexion and you're pointing your toes. Really kind of locks them up. So I keep like a little vial of base salt on the pool deck, if needed. Mustard packets. Like
Right. And like
if you go to McDonald's and you just find like the little mustard packets,
it could be
I've
electrolytes.
used those before.
Something
So
else. Yeah, it could be neurological, which the
yeah,
mustard packets kind of like shock your. There's a science behind that too, but they kind of like shock a little. So that's like not related to electrolytes, but it's just a different mechanism. So sometimes cramping is one of those things that's sometimes hard and confusing because we always associate it with electrolytes, but sometimes it can be something more
right.
like with that instance, it's like you're going from running and then you're in the pool and you're like your feet are more just a different. I think it has to do maybe more with the nerve piece of it and just the
Mm,
muscular piece. And so like the mustard or like that. There's another one we can always talk about cramps like in its own thing, but yeah, it's hard sometimes to know. But I do think base salts are great. Like I recommend those for a lot of the triathletes I work with because they're portable and you don't have to
hmm
like rely on like I like to use LMNT, but I don't. But when you're in a triathlon, you kind of have to rely on what's on the course in the water, and they don't always maybe have the right amount of electrolytes, and so to be able to
Right.
just sort of take it, and you kind of know like it gives you a rough estimate every time you take it, like how much you might be getting. I think it's best to have like a plan, so you kind of doing like a sweat sodium analysis, which I know you've recently done Justin. It's just like, or something
Yep.
like the Gatorade sweat patches is very fun, like just cheaper. And, yeah, is it as scientific? Maybe not. I mean, they do a pretty good job. So just getting an idea of like how much salt, roughly are you losing per hour and what, you can do it in different conditions and like really hot day versus a cooler day. And you can kind of get an idea and that way, when you're doing the race, you can say, okay, I know I'm losing 500 milligrams an hour. How am I going to make sure I'm replacing at least most of that? You might not get it 100% correct, but so you don't run into issues with cramping or hyponatremia. So it's kind of,
Yep.
you can do some things to kind of figure that out. So you're not just waiting until you feel crappy to to take it. Although I do think it's good to have it on hand for those situations where you're like, oh, I'm starting to feel weird or nauseous. Like because my experience was it helped right away. But yeah, definitely a good product. I mean, there's so many. There are like salt tabs you can take, like
hmm
where you swallow them or you chew on the salt tabs. I mean, there's a lot of options available, sort of depending on what you're like and what types of products you want to use. I probably tried most of them myself, so if anyone wants more,
Yeah, I tried the salt tabs and it was like in a little gel in a little capsule, almost kind of
hmm
like a prescription, like a
and you have
little
to
thing.
swallow them, and
But
so might be issues.
usually I would take them on the bike, and I was on a schedule, so it's like every kind of like hour on the every hour on the hour I would take a salt tab. But sometimes it's like it's the dexterity of the fingers, and you're trying to grab this tiny little pill, and
Mhm.
while not trying
You
to
were
like
trying to
fall
swallow.
fall off the bike and wreck yourself. So to me, it was just it required too much effort
Yeah.
to get it. It's different like if you're running or something like that, where you have a little bit more control of your environment. But if you're on the bike, it was a little challenging in my personal opinion. That's why I stopped using them and went to the base salt because I knew that this was super easy. It's like lick, turn, lick, done. Close it, throw it back in the box,
Yeah.
and I,
It's like,
and I was done.
there
But
you go. Yeah.
one of the things that I do work with my athletes on, if I know that we're training for what's going to be a hot race, during their taper week, is where I'll put in notes within the training plan and say, this is where, we'll start our carb loading, start to increase your carbohydrates. But, kind of like 2 days out from a race is where I say, okay, now we're going to do something that's called the electrolyte load. And I want, 2 days before the race, I want you to drink an extra bottle of whatever electrolyte drink that you're going to be using. Make it your standard bottle, nothing unique to it. Don't, add more or add less. Drink just a normal bottle. Then the day before a race, I tell them to drink 2 bottles. Preferably get one in from when you wake up to about lunchtime or about noon, and then start on the second bottle after that. So try and drink that from noon to, let's say, 4 o'clock. I kind of want it to finish by 4 because I don't want them up and awake, most of the night, using the bathroom and such, so because it's still fluids. But that worked for me in my last race, which was going to be a little bit of a humid race. It's worked for a couple of the other athletes that I've worked with, where this race was a half marathon. It was 100 degrees outside, and it was brutal. And I had them electrolyte loading 2 days before the race, but I didn't know what the weather was going to be like when I created the plan. And so it just so happened that it just worked out perfectly to where, they were electrolyte loading like they should have, and it all materialized. So those are some of the techniques that I use with my
Right.
athletes and myself. It seems to
That's
work.
a good thing. I think the way you did it was good. I think, yeah, just kind of adding in a little extra. You don't want to go and have like, I'm going to have 10 element packets the day before, some kind
No,
of,
no.
you don't want to overdo it either.
Yeah.
We're saying that like loading it, it's like just one or two, little bit more than you would normally do, and then maybe the morning of like having those electrolytes in there before the race too. But don't go like don't go like way overboard. I think some people
Yep.
take. I feel like you always got to put that in there because there's people that are like, oh, like I'm
Yeah.
gonna do so many. Like it's like, well then,
If one's good, let's do 4. So,
yeah, let's take the
yeah.
problem, right? So we don't want to. I mean, sodium we can load it a little bit, but we don't want to like overdo it because again, I mean, it will sort of be
Right.
filtered. We do filter it through our kidneys and stuff, but we just don't. Yeah, you don't want to overdo it. Let's see. So let's like talk now that we're talking about the hydration piece. I think
Uh-huh.
we kind of mentioned that. I think like the drinking of plenty of water is like in addition to electrolytes, like so water and electrolytes both. So you're staying hydrated and you don't get hyponatremia. That's something we want to do to be safer when we're training in the heat and just maybe get more out of it. But let's kind of focus there a little more. What are your, I know we have some notes there, but what do you think in terms of what do you recommend people do when they should go out in the heat to make it a little easier on themselves or more tolerable, but I know that's not the word.
The Yeah, I'm kind of, man. It's really really
Okay, and then we can be like,
small lettering, but I
yeah,
can tell you what I've been doing.
yeah, you
So on
go.
Saturdays I do my long ride, and I do it on my gravel bike. So I head out, and what I do is in my water bottles, in my 20-ounce bottles, I have my nutrition. So that's my electrolyte and carbohydrates. Then I carry on my back. I have a 2 liter bladder that just sits, like in a backpack, and I strap that on. And so I have both the electrolytes and just plain water. And so on my schedule, when I take a hit of my electrolyte, I also take in water with it, so that I know it's just a reminder for me to not just drink the electrolytes, because I know that I need just plain water as well. And so whenever I try and do that on the rhythm, and then sometimes I'll just take just hits of just the plain water, and because I'm going in with 2 20-ounce bottles, but I have 2 liters. I've yet to make it through the full 2 liters of water, but the last ride that I did, I was pretty close to drinking the full 2 liters, and I felt fantastic coming off of the bike. And this was a 2.5 hour, fairly intense bike ride out on the trails. So, it worked really well. I want to, from a dietetics perspective, there's a difference between electrolytes and just plain water.
Mhm.
So, you know, what's the importance of just consuming plain water from not just a hydration perspective, but from an absorption perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can. It's just that sometimes the absorption rate is a little better when you have the electrolytes because they kind of facilitate the absorption of the water a little bit better. Sometimes people will complain, especially when they're working out, that the water intake. I'm sorry, hold on one second. I'm gonna.
Her rabbit was going a little. I think
That
the
was my
rabbit got a
lizard.
little
I have
irritated.
for
Oh,
those,
that was the lizard. Okay.
for those of you who don't know, I have critters, and next time I'm putting the lizard somewhere different because this isn't working out. Every time I'm on the thing, all like this, he decides it's his time to run around and make lots of noise, and you would think that a critter like that would, but every time without fail. So I've got to figure out something with him. Anyways, so I have critters, and that is what's making the noise. So what I was gonna say is the water itself. Like I think you can take in water. It's like cooling. You can take it in and drink it. Like when I'm doing my long runs, I take in like you're doing electrolytes in a bottle, and I take a really ice cold water. So that kind of helps cool me, simultaneously getting water. And I think that's fine as long as you're not only drinking just water and not any electrolytes. So you want to make sure you can alternate it. It's fine. You're going to get it absorbed. It's just when you're sort of downing the fluid, it's still the water's still absorbed. But I think we also have to think about where it's going. Like it may be absorbed, but it maybe isn't facilitating like this electrolytes also kind of facilitate that water into our cells, into our muscle cells a little bit better. So we're not just the absorption piece, but also how it's being utilized in the body as well. So it's fine to do both, but you do want to have some of those electrolytes. Otherwise, you're gonna kind of run into some issues with just getting that fluid where it needs to go. Sometimes, if you've ever just drank a lot of water and then you're just immediately have to go pee, that's probably kind of what's happening. Is you're just kind of going right through, it's being right through, filtered right into the kidneys and kind of right out. So you don't, you may not get the full benefit of the fluid, but it's okay. Like just drink and you're still getting benefit. So don't be afraid to have water. Don't be like, oh, it doesn't have electrolytes, it's not good. You just don't want to overdo the water. I carry, like I said, both. So kind of along that road, like that light, I also take like ice cold like water. I'll like put water in my freezer, like a water bottle in my freezer, and then or I'll put half of a water, like fill half of it, and then put it in the freezer. And the next day I'll put water and then my electrolytes in the other one, so it's like frozen. So that by the time I get out to do the run and whatever, I have these like really cold water bottles that I can consume. And you can hold them too. Like sometimes I'll do a handheld. I'll put a bunch of ice in it and water, and I'll hold it. If you have cold on your palm of your hand, actually helps you. I don't know. I can't remember if they said it was both or the right or the left, but that actually helps. There's some research actually helps you with that cooling. So, there's some interesting, you know, things that you can kind of do to maybe help. And I think that does help. But the problem is when I do the ice, it's like I'm 30 minutes into my hour-long run and my ice is already melted and my liquid is already warming up, and then it's like so the other thing too I was going to mention, and you maybe talk on this too, is doing looped. It sucks, like you want to be able to go out and run and have a nice fun route, right? But if you just do looped course, like you come around 3 miles and then you come in and get in, you have a chance to get cold water, to maybe dump some cold water on your head, then go out and do another 3 mile route. Like that's what I do sometimes in the heat, is just go around in circles and just have like a looped route. And it sucks because I come home and I don't really want to leave again, but at least I have a chance to kind of get in more fluids or cool myself down a little bit. I do that when it's pretty hot out. But I don't know if you do that too. Or...
Yeah, I've done it before on the bike. I've done the frozen water bottle where, let's say I'm going out and I'm going to be using four bottles, and we're talking like, maybe like a 6 hour ride. So we're training for, a full Ironman. So I'll go through four bottles. I'll take two of them and put them in the back
I don't know why Justin
cages
just went. He just like
of my hydration system, and those are
disappeared.
the
Are
ones that
you
are
there,
completely
Justin?
frozen.
Nope.
Those are the ones
Sorry.
that I made. Did we freeze
Can you
up?
go again? Yeah, you froze up. Say that again. I don't know what happened. It's like you froze.
Okay. So what I'll do is, let's say that we're training for a full Ironman and we're going out for a 6 hour ride. I plan on going through four bottles. I'll take two of those bottles and freeze them the night before so that they're completely frozen solid in the morning. And then in the morning, I will make two fresh bottles that aren't frozen. And so what I'll do is I have a hydration system on my bike to where, I carry water in the back, and I can carry water like in my jerseys or keep them in my car or whatever. And I'll drink the ones that I made the morning of first. And so by the time I get through those two bottles, then the ones that I froze the night before are thawed out. And so they'll be nice and cold when I go to consume those. Or, like we've done this before where we'll do loops. And so let's say that we're going out on this same like 6 hour ride, rather than ride for 3 hours out and then 3 hours back, or finding a really long loop that would take the whole 6 hours. Find a loop that maybe takes 2 hours, or ride out an hour and then turn around and come back to the car. There's your 2 hour. Refill your state, refill your nutrition in your bottles. Put the old ones back and just have a big cooler that just sits in your car, and then ride another direction for 2 hours, and then come back and refill again, and maybe try and find loops where you can have kind of like this wheel and spoke format, where it's like you can ride off this direction for a while, and when you come back you can ride off in another direction, so that it doesn't feel like you're doing like the same thing and you're seeing the same stuff over and over and over again. So there's a little bit of variety, and it keeps you entertained a little bit more. But those are some of the things that I've done as well, because there's nothing worse than trying to choke down hot electrolyte drink. It's miserable, and then you're not going to want to drink it, and so then you stop drinking it, and now you've really set yourself behind the eight ball,
Right.
in terms of trying to make it through the session healthy, so that you can do something tomorrow.
Right. I've even frozen things like bottles and put them out on a course, like just drove out. I mean, this is a lot of effort, but like, okay, I'm going to do like a looped course where it's like 10 miles or something, and I'll put something, I'll freeze a bottle. By the time I get to it, it's usually, cold and starting to thaw out and stuff. So, I mean, there's ways you can get creative. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're just going to have to kind of, expect that you're not going to be able to do maybe an out and back, and unless you've planned for that somehow, like you're going somewhere where you can get hydration, or you can stop somewhere, or you put it out on the course, like you're probably gonna, I mean, you can do out and back, but you're probably not going to be able to do your full 6 hour ride that way, or a 6 hour loop where you're, unless you have some sort of place to stop and get refilled on electrolytes and fluids and things like that. So it's just something you have to kind of adjust to, I think, in the heat, and it's kind of part of it. And yeah, it's just do it, because you're not, you just have to kind of make those adjustments, even if it's hard to get back to the house, or get back to the car and go back out. But the more interesting you can make it by doing different loops, the better you are. I mean, and then, yeah, if you have that option that you're coming back, like I do to my house sometimes, then I'll have the cold faucet, like I'll just turn on my faucet or outside, like the hose, and I'll just dump water on my head that way. I'm like, it's cold, and I'll just be like completely soaked, but it feels so good. You know what I mean? Like just little things like that, and then you go back out and you've cooled off, and then you can go do your second loop. And so any kind of cold water on your head, or holding cold water in your hands can help. Anything like that is going to make a big difference. You see people like having like some kind of thing that they've made or something where they put cold water like around their neck and they're running with it. I mean, you can get, or cold ice, like put ice around your neck. I mean, there's so many things that you can kind of do. I'm sure you could buy like fancy ice, like cooling systems. I don't know what, I've never like bought anything like that. I'm sure there's stuff you can purchase too, maybe, but just doing things to help it be a little bit more, you can get more out of your training, because you might, if you have to do a longer workout or a harder workout, now you're able to do it a little bit easier. It's not going to feel good still. It's not going to be like when it's cool out and you feel great, but at least it makes it a little bit more, maybe more enjoyable, but also just like allows you to do that workout and finish it, and not be maybe completely depleted also for the next day. Because that's another thing, I think, when you're planning these types of workouts in the heat, it's just that the heat takes so much out of you in terms of recovery, and the more you can make it easier on yourself, the better you can feel like the next subsequent days too in your training. Um, I feel like if you have to use a treadmill, it, if you have a treadmill inside where it's cooler, like that's, don't feel like you have to be like, oh, I'm so tough. Like I'm not going to use my treadmill because treadmill running isn't the same and that's cheating. Or don't. That's like BS. Like like don't.
Yeah.
Like the treadmill is your best friend sometimes. It's okay. You hear these people online saying that treadmill doesn't count. Like I'm sorry. I don't agree with that. I did a lot of my training for my last marathon on the treadmill when it was crappy outside.
Yep.
Yeah, and I did great. I did fine. So it does count and it's okay. And I actually have this portable cooling thing. It's like almost like a swamp cooler thing that I can portably put right in front of my treadmill because my treadmill is out in the mezzanine, which is outside in our garage. So I'll plop that right in front of my treadmill and it blasts out cool air, and I'm not afraid to do that if I have to. And I don't care if you think it's cheating, because it's like I'm getting my good
Nope.
quality workout in and I'm doing it and it's getting done and I don't have to deal with the heat, right? So like, but I will do some heat training too. It's just that I'm not doing that every day and I'm not always going to do my quality stuff in the heat. So yeah, just putting that out there. Don't get caught up in that whatever it is about treadmills or not being tough or something, because I think that
Yeah, I don't understand why the treadmill has like this bad connotation, because these are the same athletes that'll stick their bike on the bike trainer and they'll do, all their bike training indoors streaming Netflix, and they've got their 6 water bottles on the table and they're scrolling through social media, but they won't run on a treadmill because treadmill's cheating. It makes no sense whatsoever.
that treadmills like are harder in my opinion. I mean,
Yes.
in the sense of like the mental piece of it, right? Because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just here.
Yeah, because you can hit that stop button anytime.
Right?
So there's a little bit of mental training to it.
Yeah, I think so. And it does, you put it up on an incline and you can get some really good like incline work done. It's Treadmills are a great tool. So anyway, so yeah, just things to think about. I think we already talked about heat acclimation. And I think maybe Dustin put this one in, but leaving your ego at the door when it comes to training and just adjusting I'm thinking what you're meaning by that is adjust your perception of just your time.
Yeah, it's stop trying to chase paces and things that you think that you should be able to hit, and it's the same pace that you were able to knock off just a few months ago, where temperatures were nice and cool and there was no humidity, and you were able to bust out 6-7 minute miles, and now all of a sudden you're hitting like 8 and 9 minute miles. No, you're not getting less fit. You're not losing fitness. You're now putting the body in more extreme conditions, and therefore it has to adjust, and you have to adjust with it. If you fail to adjust to it, then you're going to suffer the consequences of it. And so one of the things that I would bring up is that if you do plan on doing a challenging session that is going to be outdoors, and challenging is going to be relative. It's not like I'm saying, we're going out and we're doing threshold intervals for a run workout, or we're doing, crazy stuff on the bike. It's just the sheer fact that you're doing it outdoors. Maybe if you think that this is going to be like one of your long sessions, make the next day an easy session, because what you just put your body through was a significant stressor. And so a lot of times what I'll do is, when I know that I have a long workout and I'm going to be doing it outdoors and I know it's going to be hot and humid, I don't plan anything for the evening. I know that I want to just kind of like sit around. I get maybe in the Normatec boots or whatever system, however you recover from your session, start doing that right then and there, because that's going to make you more prepared for the next day. And so if you can find like an easier session to do, the hole that you dug the day before is not going to get dug deeper by trying to go out and then chase this weekend warrior mentality, because that's where you have your ability to do. Because the heat is an equalizer. It doesn't matter how much fitness you have. You throw the most fit athlete outdoors into those kind of conditions, and they're not going to perform the same. And so that's just something to consider. One of the things that has been working for me, and I've been doing it in the last couple of my races, is every aid station that you go to, grab the first cup that you grab, the first cup of water that you grab goes on the head. The second cup goes in the mouth. And if you can work your way through the aid station, repeat that pattern. One cup on the head, one cup in the mouth, head, mouth, until you get to the end of the aid station. Because what's going on is the body is cooling, and it doesn't necessarily have to be cold water. It's just the evaporating process is what's cooling the body. So even if it's warm or tepid water, it doesn't really matter, because the way when that water starts to evaporate is how the body is going to be cooling itself. So that has seemed to work for me, and it's just it kind of like it's refreshing, even though you're still like in hot and humid conditions. They also, if you're a triathlete, they do make tri suits that have like these little pockets that are like inside your kit, where you can put ice. One of the fastest ways to cool yourself is to dump ice down your tri shorts. It's not comfortable, I can tell you that right now, when that ice hits, but it is effective. So if that's one of the things, if you find yourself out on the race course and you're lucky enough for them to have ice, that is a really good way to kind of cool yourself. Is to dump ice down the tri shorts, or if you run with a hat. Some people don't like to run with a hat and during summer races, because they feel like it traps in the heat and they feel hotter. But throwing ice into the hat and then putting the hat back on is another effective way. Get really good at dumping water over your head without trying to get them in, without getting your feet wet. That's another skill that is worthy of practice. And it's just, you just kind of, when you're running, you kind of lean a little bit further so that your head is kind of ahead of your feet, and just kind of dump it, and then throw your head back, and then straighten back up again. That's the approach that I've been using. It diverts the water, and so my feet don't get wet, because I hate wet socks.
Maybe I'm naturally just doing that. You're just kind of
Yeah,
like,
it's
yeah.
just, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, because I feel like, yeah, I'm like, I don't really get, yeah, maybe I'm just naturally like leaning forward and doing that. But yeah, I know, like having your feet get wet. Sorry, I had to go get my, I was listening to you, I had to get my plug in because I realized I had my computer cord and plug in somewhere else, and I was running out of batteries. So,
It's all
I
good.
did hear what you were saying. Yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know if I can think of any other strategies for the heat. I think we've kind of covered a lot in terms of like what might help. Unfortunately, there's just no way to make it um, enjoyable, really. So there's no. I don't think we have any
Yeah.
tricks that are like, oh, this is gonna make heat training feel easy, right?
No, it's going to be hard.
It's just gonna be hard. But I do think we should go back and talk a little bit about the actual like adaptive piece there. So, what people who maybe want to use heat training as a tool to maybe become a little bit more adapted, or to build more red blood cells or get some of that benefit. We already kind of mentioned this a little bit, but it doesn't happen within the first hot day you go out running. This is something that does kind of happen over time, and it takes a little bit of consistent heat training to have this occur. But there is that benefit, and so I think the problem is to just to keep in mind that if you do heat training all through the summer, but you have a race in December, it doesn't last very long. So if you decide to do the heat training, the heat adaptation unfortunately only maybe lasts a week or two, similar to altitude training. So as soon as you stop running in the heat, and your body kind of then deacclimates to it. So if you're going to use this as like a tool for training to improve your time, sometimes you have to use it. It's great if you can use it and you're going somewhere where that's cooler. You're going to do a race where it's cooler, because then you can really see the benefit of it. Or you might want to have ways that you continue to implement it, whether it's like a sauna or something like that, outside of the heat of the summer so you can continue to get that benefit. So just something to consider. But I don't know. I've never personally ever really, I mean, I just feel like I'm heat training in the summer. I'm not like trying to get out and do some sort of specific heat training, but I think there are ways to like do it if you want to specifically optimize it. I think, just a few notes and then I'm curious what your thoughts are, Justin. I would say like a couple, 2, 3 times a week, and it doesn't, and you can do your quality runs inside. I think that heat training maybe works really well if you do like a 30-minute easy run. You could do like a double where you do your quality session and then maybe like a 30-minute hot afternoon run, where you're just sort of getting that heat piece. Some people will do their run and then wear a heat suit for a certain amount of time or go in the sauna immediately after. So there's like different ways to do it. You don't always have to do it where you're running in the heat, just getting in the sauna or doing some sort of hot bath, really, really hot bath, pretty warm, or sauna or heat suit after a training session for a period of time can potentially have produce those adaptations. So I don't know what your thoughts are. Have you kind of run into that or recommend that at all for people?
Yeah, one of the things that I did for my last race in order to heat acclimate, because we hadn't really had very high temps, but I knew that it was going to be hot and humid for the race. So I had to find a way to at least start the acclimation process. And so what I would do is after my gym sessions, so let's say, I would jump off the treadmill and then my gym has an infrared sauna. And then so I would do my run and then that would be the very next place that I would go. I would go up into the sauna and sit in the sauna for 30 minutes and just kind of sit there and practice my breathing, trying to, because it's challenging to breathe in that hot air. And so that's what you're kind of training yourself to do. And it really starts to build up that sweat starts rolling.
Mm-hmm.
If you're swimming and you're a triathlete, that's another good time. So if you have the ability to go from the pool to the sauna, that's another reasonable method to use. I like the sauna. I don't like the humid saunas. I like the infrared sauna is one that I tend to like a little bit more. It's a different kind of technology, and it doesn't feel like it's hard to breathe. It's harder than just like sitting in a room, yes, but it's not the same kind of like you're trying to breathe through a straw. It's miserable feeling. But I found that the infrared sauna has worked for me, and I felt like I handled the heat pretty well in my last race. I didn't feel stressed at all. Yes, I was sweating, but I didn't feel like the punch in the gut kind of feeling that you get after a high effort out in the heat. So
Right.
sauna worked well. Hot tubs work great. So if you can go from let's say a pool session and hit the hot tub, if your gym has that or if you have that ability, then great. That's another thing that you can do, because all you're looking to do is to raise your core body temperature. So if that means sitting in a sauna or sitting in a hot tub, it's effectively doing the same thing. So
Yeah, I mean, I've done sauna training once when I did my 1/2 Ironman that I did, and because I knew it was going to be September, I knew it was going to be hot, so I would train and then I would spend some time in like, it was like a steam sauna, so it was the kind you don't like, but that was all I had access to, and I
yeah, I
did
don't like.
I did a lot of my swims and then we get in the hot tub. I did that just unknowingly. I don't think I think I did the sauna because of the heat, but I did that other thing because it just felt good to get in the hot tub after a
Mm-hmm.
swim, and I'd spend some time there. I don't think I spent like 30 minutes in there, but I'd spent some time in the hot tub. So, I mean, that was just unknowingly, but it probably helped because that race was very hot and I did fairly well. I mean, I didn't have like any crash and burn scenario there. So, um, you know, so yeah, I think it can help. I've never done anything very specific though, where I've done specific runs in the heat just for the heat training or wear a heat suit. So I've thought about it, like, because I'm always up to experimenting. So I'm like, maybe I'll give it a try this summer and maybe try doing some runs and then concocting up like a heat suit or getting in a hot bath or going into the sauna, which, or not the sauna, but this hot tub, which I don't really have access to very regularly. So that's the other thing is having access to something that you can do
Yeah.
2 to 3 times a week, because you can't just do it once a week. It has to be, I think,
No, yeah, you got to do it several times.
several times. I'd say at least 2 or 3.
Hmm.
And that's what the kind of the science that I was looking into and some of the information I was looking into said. I don't even know, perhaps they don't even really know exactly how many and or how long at this point, but I think I would sort of say, 30 minutes of running or more. And then I'm not sure about the sauna or hot tub, kind of what's recommended there, but just something that's kind of getting you to a point where you're a bit uncomfortable. It's gotta be when you get to the hot tub and you're like, okay, I'm getting hot and you're ready to get out. Like, try to stay in there and be
Yeah.
uncomfortable. This isn't supposed to be comfortable. You know what I mean? Like, so that's where the heat training's happening, is, and not to the point where you're going to pass out or have heat stroke, obviously. So that's where you have to be really careful. But you can't, it's not going to be like, oh, I'm getting in the sauna or I'm getting in the hot tub. This is going to be real comfortable and relaxing. It's kind of getting to the point where you're like, I'm getting a little bit uncomfortable. Like, it's getting pretty warm, and then obviously kind of maybe gradually increasing the time you're in there too, and not doing like 30 minutes in the hot tub all at once, but sort of gradually increasing that discomfort. That would be my recommendation of maybe how to go about that. But yeah, there is some benefit to it, but you definitely have to figure out how you're going to continue doing it past the hot summer months if you want to continue to get that benefit, and it isn't comfortable. So those are things to consider. But yeah, I don't know.
There's definitely a mental part to heat training.
That's
It's
true.
not
Yeah.
that you're trying to the only thing that you're not trying to do is trying to build physiological adaptation, right? You, yeah, that's part of it. But if it's going to be hot on race day, you have to mentally deal with that.
Hmm.
And I think that I found that, like especially the sauna, because it's easy to walk out, and I set it up on my watch and I just hit the timer, and I'm telling myself I'm not leaving this room until 30 minutes is up. But at 15 minutes, I want out the room. And then at 20 minutes, I really want out the room. And so I'm forcing myself to stick with it, which
Right.
is one skill that you're going to have on race day. You're gonna have to stick with it. It's going to be hard, but it's something that you'll have to do if you want to finish.
That's the truth. Yeah.
So
Like
I think that it's really good practice.
right. Yeah. Because you got it. Yeah. You have this, use time. You have to stick in there, and then you're like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm uncomfortable, and it's not. Yeah. It's not going to be comfortable. I think that's part of it, right? And then sticking with it the entire time. I mean, obviously, if you're starting to have weird symptoms and you're like, this is too much, get out. But yeah, and I mean, there's things too. There's things people do that I think are extreme, like the heat suit for 20 miles, or people had to full on workouts in the sauna. You hear about that. I just think there's things there. I think that's kind of going a little bit to a degree of potentially putting yourself at a lot of risk for health, issues. So, do the heat training, but try to avoid seeing what you are looking, other people doing on Instagram, who may just be wanting to try to push the limit, first of all, of what they're capable of, which isn't always the thing that's going to like have health benefits, right? It might be like somewhat dangerous. Or people, I think, that are just trying to get likes, like, this is how tough I am. Look, I can do this like bike workout in the sauna. Like, yeah, I don't think that's a great ideal. I mean, maybe it works sometimes for certain people, but it's kind of dangerous. So, just being cautious too, to not overdo it either. So
Yeah, I've heard of people like putting their bike trainer in their attic, and then they'll sit there and they'll do like a really hard session in their attic as they're just dripping sweat. It's stuff like that. I think I wouldn't even suggest anybody do that.
yeah, that's
Honestly, it's just it doesn't make much sense. You can still achieve heat acclimation indoors. So
right.
there's still things that you can do.
Mhm.
If that means not using like if you're going to get on the treadmill, don't use a fan and wear like a hoodie and put the hood up on your hoodie. Same impact. Same. You're achieving the same thing. It's raising your core body temperature, even though you're indoors. Do the same thing on the bike. No fan. Put your hoodie on. Put the hood up, and then get to work. It's this. It's like I said. It's going to generate the same kind of results. Is it going to happen as fast as if you went outside? Probably not, because I doubt that you'll be able to generate enough heat under that hoodie to mimic outdoor conditions. But a little bit goes a long way. And if you keep at it, it's cumulative. It's just like training fitness that you're trying to generate. We don't go out and immediately start running, 20-minute 5Ks, most of us. Most of us have to build up to something like that. It's the same kind of mentality. It's a process. It's something you start at and you accumulate over time. It doesn't stick with you like fitness, like Coach Katie was saying. Eventually when you stop practicing heat acclimation, you lose it. Mm-hmm. Same principle applies when you stop working out. You may not lose it as quickly, but yes, you will eventually start to lose some fitness, just like you will deacclimate. And it's not like, it's December and all of a sudden we're all sweating because we've maintained our heat acclimation. It doesn't happen that way. But
yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think we've kind of covered the heat piece and the acclimation piece pretty good. I don't know if I mean, I think we made good points with the, with the heat piece and how to add acclimating to it. I don't know if I have any other. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I would like add or want to bring up, but I feel like
the only other thing that I would try and bring up is that if you found yourself procrastinating a little bit and now you're approaching your race and it's coming quicker and quicker and you didn't have a whole lot of motivation to train, January, February, and March, and now all of a sudden you have a September race that's coming up and you're just like, oh, now I have to start training a little bit. I want to warn you that trying to add fitness in terms of like getting faster, whether you're running or if you're cycling or swimming is a little bit different, but anything that requires it to be done outdoors, I have to warn you that it's very hard to get faster in the heat. Mm-hmm. So if you can find ways to build a periodized plan to where you do a lot of speed-focused work in January, February, and March, whether that be on a treadmill or on a trainer, or even if you want to run outdoors, you still can run outdoors and you can still do speed work. Do it during the times of the year that's conducive to building that fitness, and then all you have to do is try and maintain that fitness when it starts to get hot, rather than trying to find more speed and have your body adapt to the heat. I have to say, I've found a lot of athletes melt down faster when they try and make up for time that they lost. Mm-hmm. And, now they're trying to get faster while dealing with the heat. And they're just like, I can't seem to get faster. And it's like, well, no kidding. It's, a dew point of 74. It's, 90 degrees and we have, 80% humidity. That's why you don't feel fast. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to feel fast. In those conditions. So think ahead a little bit, and when it comes, start to plan out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, or you have to make those adjustments to like find ways to get
or adjust your expectations.
Or like, adjust your expectations, or do the training indoors on, where it's cooler, those speed workouts, or we might have to wake up at 4:30 to do it at 5 to get it, at least here. I know the East Coast, this is different. In Texas and Arizona, it's still hot at 5. But, like, here, it's 65 degrees at 5. Or it's something cool, like, fairly cool. So, if I want to do any quality sessions outside, I've got to be up real early. So, like, I can get a good quality workout in at that time. But I have to sort of adjust my whole training schedule around that, right? And it means I maybe don't sleep as well. So, you just have to kind of make those adjustments, and it's not exactly my ideal time to run, but you have to sort of adapt to it a little bit and change things to accommodate those cooler times of the day and things like that. So I think you either have to kind of adjust your expectation, adjust your training plan, or you have to make adjustments to your schedule or where you train in order to make that happen. So just things to think about. But yeah, that's a good point too, is expectations for races and those things that you're thinking about with the heat training. But hopefully everybody, hopefully people found this helpful to kind of go through and talk in more detail about the heat, things they want to consider with the hydration and the electrolytes, and the things to think about with fueling. Just, why it sucks, why I feel so terrible in the heat, and how to make adjustments, and changing expectations. So I think we really covered it all really quite well, I believe. Yes, and I know we're close to an hour 30, so we'll maybe wrap it up here.
In the next episode of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, we will talk about protein consumption in athletes. This is a really big topic lately, so we wanted to bring you our take on this particular topic. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and we will see everyone soon. Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Feel free to leave us up to a 5-star review on iTunes and Spotify, because leaving a review really helps others like you find us. Visit the podcast website for other episodes of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast at enduranceathletejourney.buzzsprout.com. Have questions or comments about the podcast? Send Coach Justin and Kate an email at theenduranceathletejourney@gmail.com. For all things coaching, visit Coach Katie at fuel2run.com and Coach Justin at tabularasaracing.com. Again, thank you for listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and remember to find joy in the journey.